Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video will be the fifth and final video of this farmhouse style dining table build. In this section of the video, I'll show you how I attach the tabletop to the frame with Z-clips to allow for wood movement and expansion and contraction over time. If you haven't seen the first 4 videos, be sure to check those out on my channel, which will show you every step of how I built this table to make it look like it does here. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out on any upcoming videos. And with that said, let's get into the final step of how I made this table. So here's the Z-clips that I'll be using to attach this tabletop. So this part of the Z-clip will slide into a slot on the apron that will be free to move back and forth. This piece will be secured with a screw into the tabletop, so this won't move, but this will. So as the tabletop expands and contracts with temperature and humidity change, since this piece is free to move, it'll allow the tabletop to expand and contract without causing stress in the boards of the tabletop. Now these are my preference to use because they're sturdy. I think they're easy to use. You will have to cut a slot out either with a table saw or the router. I usually use the router, but I'll show you how to do it with the table saw as well. If you don't want to use these, another method you could use are these expansion brackets. So these will go up underneath the tabletop, and in the same manner, because of the way that the slots are, these will allow for wood movement as well. So as I mentioned, I want to use the Z-clips on this. So I'm using a slot cutter bit in my router to cut the slots out. So I'll put the slot cutter bit in my router, and then I'll set the plunge depth to just a little bit deeper than the actual Z-clip itself. So this is upside down, but you can see here, the bit is a little bit further extended than the Z-clip. So once that's set, you can then use the router to cut the slots out where the Z-clips will go. Now because the diameter of this bit is larger, you'll want to turn the speed on the router down. So this router has a speed setting of 1 to 6, and I put it at 3 whenever I cut these out. Another thing worth mentioning is that you want to let the router come to a complete stop after the cut is made, otherwise you can risk kickback with this bit. So let it fully stop, and then you can take the router bit out. Once the slots are cut, you can pop the Z-clips in and you're ready to go. Now, if you don't want to do this, I'll show you how to do this on the table saw shortly. Doesn't really matter which method you use. I usually just use the router because I always forget to run the apron pieces over the table saw before I assemble them. So if you don't have a router or you don't want to use a router, you can do this on the table saw as well. So obviously make sure the saw is unplugged here. So you can put the Z-clip in the gap here and then push the fence up against it to where it sits just about right there. So a little bit further away. So not quite flush with the blade, but on top of the blade. So then lock the fence in place and then adjust the height of the blade. So you want the groove to come at the crease right here. That way this whole piece right here will fit down in the groove. Okay, so that'll be pretty close right there. After you have the blade and the fence adjusted, you can just run the apron pieces over top of the saw blade. So I am using a scrap board here, but this would resemble each piece of the apron before I had them together. As I mentioned, I usually forget to do this, so that's why I use the router method instead of this. But this will work just as well. So then when you're finished, you have a groove on the inside of the apron. So this piece would be the inside, this is the outside where it would show, but then the Z-clip can fit down in this slot and it's free to move this way. So again, this piece here will be stationary on the tabletop where the clip in the slot is free to move, which will allow for wood expansion and contraction. Once the Z-clips are in the slots, the tabletop can be put on the table. So it would be easier if you had somebody help you carry the tabletop. Obviously, I was working by myself, so I just brought it over and then it can gently be set down on the top. So once the top is on the table base, it's important to make sure that you have equal spacing on each side so that the overhang of the tabletop isn't way more on one side than it is the other. So to make sure the overhang is equal, I measure the distance of the overhang on each side and then I just split the difference. For example, if there was a 1-inch overhang on one side and a 2-inch overhang on the other side, I would just split the difference to 1.5 inches overhang on each side. So I throw a clamp on the edge just to hold the tabletop in place, and then the Z-clips can be attached using screws. Make sure that the screws aren't too long, because if they are, they'll go through the tabletop, which would be really bad. All right, so our Z-clips are installed on the bottom. Now, if you wanted to use the expansion bracket instead of the Z-clip, you would simply put it like this. So the bottom piece would be secured into the apron, and the top piece right here would go into the tabletop. So a way to remember that which way this goes is that this top piece here should always be perpendicular to the grain of the tabletop. So the tabletop grain runs this way, which means that this board will expand and contract this way. So by putting the slot perpendicular to the tabletop, the top will be free to move across the slot. If you had the bracket this way, this here would actually restrict wood movement and the top wouldn't be allowed to expand and contract. So this would be essentially the same as using a screw or a pocket hole to hold the top in place. So if these were to be used, you could put a screw on the piece in the apron right here and then a screw on the piece in the tabletop. One thing that I like to do is to pull this down a little bit, put it in the apron first, and then put it in the tabletop. This will actually help pull the tabletop downward a little bit, which is the same reason that we cut these slots a little bit lower so that it'll pull the tabletop down rather than this being flush where there could be a gap left there. And that's all there is to it as far as putting the Z-clips in, so that'll hold the top securely in place. So that's it as far as building the table goes. There's a couple features of this table that I wanted to touch on real quick. One thing that I love about this table is just the overall aesthetic appearance of it. I think that the espresso top looks great on the bright white base. It gives a really good feel overall. Now you've seen this in the other videos, but the top of this has a super high glossy polyurethane finish. It's almost perfectly smooth, and with 4 coats of polyurethane, this both looks great and it'll be durable for a long time. Also on the top, we've got these breadboards, which is a full-length dovetail breadboard. As you can see, there's almost no separation from the breadboard and the table, so these won't be the classic crumb catcher. This is a really clean line, and these breadboards should stay tight indefinitely. So as this tabletop is pine, there are some knots in here. I filled these in with Starbond, which is a product that I'm kind of new to, but this filled the knots really well. So again, nothing will fall down in these cracks. This was a massive hole in the table, and you can see it's practically filled completely flush with the tabletop. Another thing I like are these round legs. These are from Carolina Leg Company. Now I have no prior affiliation or association with Carolina Leg Company. I just use their legs because I think they're awesome. But these legs really are superior as you get them out of the box. There's no work, no manipulation that needs done on these. They're practically perfect. So these are painted with the white finish, but using this leg style for a table build is very efficient, and I think it gives the table an awesome end result altogether. Another thing that I like is just a little bit of detail, which is this groove routed in the apron. All I did was cut this with a straight bit, but I think it's just one more element of detail that really makes the table stand out and looks like there was some extra work put into it rather than just throwing some boards together. So with everything we just talked about, that's it for this. This table is finished. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you haven't seen the first 4 videos on this table, I'll link those in the description so you can check that out. In those videos, I'll show you exactly how I did everything on this table with building the base, painting the base, building the top, staining and clear coating the top, and then this final video with putting the tabletop on. Be sure to give me a thumbs up and leave a comment letting me know what you like or what you would do differently to this table. As always, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more.